The monastery bells rang just before sunset. The sound was heavy, echoing across the valley, and for a moment it felt less like a call to prayer and more like a warning. I stood at the entrance, waiting, because I had been told very clearly that my assignment would arrive at this exact hour. The gates opened with a slow creak. 2 monks stepped through, both wearing plain robes with their hoods pulled so low I couldn't see their faces. Between them walked a boy, no older than 12. He wasn't shackled or restrained, but the way they walked around him made it obvious he wasn't normal. When I first looked at him, I thought he was just a pale kid who hadn't seen the sun in years. His skin looked too white, too clean, almost like porcelain. His eyes were dark, darker than I'd ever seen, so dark that his pupils and irises seemed to blur into one. But what really unsettled me was the way he moved. He didn't stumble, didn't fidget, didn't act like a child at all. Every step was slow, deliberate, like he was copying what he thought a boy should look like. "This is Elias," one of the monks said. His voice was flat, emotionless, like he'd rehearsed it 100 times. "You will guard him, and you will follow the rules." The other monk handed me a folded piece of parchment. The paper was old, but the writing was sharp and fresh. The list was short, but every line felt wrong. Rule 1. Elias must drink his draft at sunrise and sunset, not before, not after. Rule 2. He cannot leave the monastery once the sun goes down. Rule 3. No mirrors, no cameras, no reflections. Rule 4. If he hungers, you must never offer your blood. Use the iron chalice kept in the chapel. Rule 5. If he speaks in a language you don't understand, do not answer. I frowned and asked the obvious question. "What is he?" Neither monk replied. They just lowered their heads, turned, and walked away, leaving me alone with the boy. The monastery was almost empty that night. Most of the monks kept to their cells, and the halls felt abandoned. Elias followed me silently, not asking where we were going, not even pretending to be curious. I brought him to the quarters they had prepared. 2 rooms, one for me, one for him. The rooms had no personal touches. Bare walls, wooden furniture, nothing more. It felt like a prison made to look like a monastery. At dinner, I tried to get him to eat. Bread, stew, anything. He didn't touch it. He sat at the window instead, staring into the fog outside. His lips moved, whispering words I couldn't understand. It didn't sound like Latin or anything I'd heard in church before. The tone was heavy, sharp, like broken glass being dragged on stone. "Elias," I said, trying to break his trance. "What do you like to do? Reading? Games?" He turned his head slightly, not looking at me fully. His voice was quiet, flat. "I like to listen." "To what?" His mouth twitched, almost like he wanted to smile. "To the things outside. They wait for me." The words sent a chill through me. I looked out the window, but there was nothing except the mist crawling between the trees and the stone walls. And yet, I swear I heard something. A faint scratching, like claws dragging across the courtyard stones. Something else too, a sound like wings beating against nothing. I shut the window quickly and pulled the curtain closed. Elias didn't move. He just sat there, staring at the glass as if he could still see through it. That night, when the bells rang for evening prayers, I heard him again, not praying, chatting. His voice wasn't the voice of a child anymore. It sounded deeper, older, like someone else was speaking through him. Every instinct in me wanted to go inside his room and stop him, but the first rule burned in my head. Do not break the rules. So I stayed outside his door, listening as he whispered to something I couldn't see, while the monastery halls filled with the sound of wings and scratching that came from nowhere. And that was only the first night. The first morning started before the sun was even up. I woke to find Elias already awake, sitting at the table with his hands folded, staring at nothing. He didn't look tired, not even bored, just still. The parchment with the rules said he had to drink his draft at sunrise, so I waited until the first light touched the window. I poured the thick, dark liquid into the iron cup. The smell was strong, like metal and rotten herbs. I slid it across the table. "Drink," I told him. He lifted it with both hands and swallowed it all in one go. No hesitation. Afterward, He set the cup down and whispered, "It keeps me quiet." Then he didn't say another word for an hour, just sat there staring at the empty cup. During the day, I tried to keep things normal. I made him food, bread, cheese, some fruit the monks had left. He didn't touch it. "I don't eat this," he said. When I asked what he did eat, he just looked at me and answered, "Not during the day." That was all. He wandered the halls like he knew them already, running his hands along the walls. Sometimes he stopped, pressed his palm against the stone, and stood there like he was listening. I asked him once what he was doing. "The walls remember," he said. Then he walked away. I didn't ask again. By afternoon, I started noticing how he watched the windows. The closer it got to sunset, the more restless he became. He asked twice if he could go outside. "Just for a little while," he said. His tone wasn't begging, but sharp, almost like an order. I told him no, that the rules were clear. He frowned but didn't argue. Still, I saw the way his eyes followed the fading light, like he was waiting for it to disappear. When the bells rang for evening prayer, the monastery felt different. The fog outside was thicker, heavier, pressing against the windows as if it wanted to come in. That's when I heard it for the first time. Scratching, faint but steady, like claws dragging against stone. Then whispers, low and broken, carried through the mist. Elias stood by the door, his hand resting flat against the wood. "They call me," he said softly. "No one's calling you," I replied, stepping in front of him. He looked up at me with eyes that seemed even darker in the half-light. "Not people. The others. They wait. They can't wake without me." The words made my stomach turn. I remembered Rule 2. Never let him out after dark. I understood why now. That night, after he took his draft again, he locked himself in his room. I heard him whispering inside. Not like a prayer, but like a conversation. His voice rose and fell as if someone was answering him. But I only heard him. The rules said if he spoke in another tongue, I must not answer. So I stayed outside, listening, gripping the handle of my door, but never turning it. Around midnight, the temperature dropped. The stone walls grew cold, and my breath fogged in the air. The scratching outside grew louder, circling the building. At one point, something hit the shutters of my window hard enough to rattle them. I froze, waiting, but didn't try again. I didn't sleep at all. I sat in the hall with a candle, watching Elias's door, hearing him murmur in that strange language until the first light of morning broke through the cracks in the shutters. Only then did the sounds outside stop. The scratching, the whispers, all gone as if they had never been there. That was when I finally understood. The rules weren't just superstition. They were the only thing keeping the monsters out and keeping Elias in. By the third night, I was already used to Elias being strange, but something changed. He didn't just follow the rules anymore. He started testing them. It began in the late afternoon. We were walking in the cloister when he suddenly stopped at a window that faced the forest. The fog outside was thick, rolling across the ground in slow waves. Elias pressed his hand against the glass. "They're closer today," he said. "Who?" I asked. "The ones who wait. They're hungry. They know I'm here." I stepped between him and the window. "Back away." He didn't move. He leaned forward, his forehead against the glass. His lips moved like he was whispering, but I couldn't hear the words. The temperature dropped so fast the glass began to frost over around his hand. I grabbed his shoulder and pulled him back. His skin was ice cold. That night, the scratching outside didn't stop. It moved along the walls, around the gates, across the roof. Sometimes it sounded like claws, sometimes like nails, sometimes like bones dragging across stone. At one point I heard something breathe right outside the door. Slow, heavy, like a beast twice the size of a man. I checked the rules again, reading them under candlelight. Every line felt heavier now, especially the last one. If he speaks in a language you do not understand, do not answer. At midnight I heard Elias. Not whispers this time. Chatting. His voice was deep, far too deep for a boy his age. I pressed my ear to the door and realized there were two voices. One was his. The other was lower, rougher, like an animal trying to form words. I knocked on the door. "Elias, stop." Silence. Then his voice, soft and normal again. "Go away." "I'm not going anywhere," I said. The second voice laughed. A horrible sound, like stones grinding together. Then Elias shouted something in that strange language, and the walls shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. Outside, the scratching turned into pounding. Something big was hitting the walls, over and over, trying to break through. I grabbed the handle, but the metal burned cold against my hand. It was locked from the inside. I wanted to break it open, but the rules screamed in my head. Do not interrupt. Do not break the rules. So I stood there helpless as the door glowed faintly with a pale blue light, as if symbols were being drawn on the wood from the inside. Elias's voice rose, matching the growls of whatever he was talking to. Then suddenly silence. The light faded. The scratching outside stopped. I stood there breathing hard, still gripping the handle, when Elias finally spoke again. His voice was calm, almost too calm. "It's not time yet," he said from the other side. I wanted to ask what he meant, but the words stuck in my throat. I backed away slowly, leaving him locked inside. That night I didn't close my eyes once. I sat in the hall, watching the shadows move along the cracks under his door, listening to him hum a song that didn't sound human at all. By dawn, I knew one thing for certain. The rules weren't just to keep Elias under control. They were to stop whatever was waiting outside from waking up completely. And Elias, he was starting to enjoy pushing those limits. The fourth night was the one that changed everything. Elias had been restless all day. He paced the halls, moving from window to window, watching the fog as if it was calling his name. He didn't eat. He barely spoke. And when he did, his words were sharp. "They're waiting," he kept repeating. "They're hungry." By sunset, the air in the monastery was colder than it should have been. I checked the rules again, reading them like my life depended on it. Sunrise and sunset medicine. No leaving after dark. No mirrors. No blood. Don't answer him if he speaks in another tongue. I'd followed them exactly, but I had the feeling the rules weren't holding anymore. At 6, I gave him the draft. He stared at it for a long time before taking it. His eyes were darker than usual, almost black. "It doesn't help anymore," he said. "It only makes me weak." "That's the point," I told him. He didn't argue. He just swallowed it and walked away. After dark, the noises outside started again, but this time they were worse. The scratching turned into pounding, heavy blows that made the walls shake. The windows rattled. The fog pressed against the glass, so hard it looked solid, like something alive was leaning into it. I thought I saw shapes moving inside it, long limbs, bent in wrong angles, crawling closer. Then Elias disappeared from the room I'd left him in. I searched the halls and found him in the chapel, standing in front of the iron chalice the monks had mentioned. His lips were moving fast, chanting. The symbols carved into the chalice glowed faintly, blue and sickly, like veins under skin. "Stop it," I shouted. He turned slowly, and for a second his eyes weren't a child's anymore. They were ancient, filled with hunger. "You don't understand. Without me, they cannot wake. But I'm tired of sleeping." The ground shook. From outside, a loud crack echoed as if something massive had split stone with its claws. Dust fell from the ceiling. "Elias, you can't do this," I yelled. He tilted his head. "It's already happening." The doors of the chapel slammed shut behind me on their own. I ran to him, grabbed his shoulder. His skin was freezing, like holding ice. The moment I touched him, I felt it, something pulling at me, tugging the warmth and life from inside my body. I let go immediately, gasping. He smiled, and it wasn't a child's smile. From the windows of the chapel, I saw shapes pressing closer through the fog. Huge, twisted, wrong. Their shadows stretched across the glass. Long arms ending in too many fingers, mouths that opened sideways, eyes that glowed faint red. They weren't trying to hide anymore. They were waiting. The chanting grew louder. Elias's voice was mixed now with another voice, deep and broken, like stone grinding on stone. Symbols appeared on the chapel walls, glowing with the same sick light as the chalice. My ears rang. My skin burned just from hearing the words. I remembered the rules again, but the last one hit me like a knife. If he speaks in a language you do not understand, do not answer. And yet I wanted to. The sound of his voice almost pulled words out of me. It was like a hook dragging at my throat, begging me to answer back. I covered my mouth with my hand and forced myself not to speak. The doors of the chapel shook violently. Something outside was slamming against them again and again. The iron hinges bent. The wood began to split. Whatever was outside didn't plan to wait any longer. I ran to Elias, grabbed the chalice, and tried to pull it from his hands. It burned like fire and ice at the same time. He screamed, and for a second his voice wasn't his own. It was hundreds of voices, screaming together, echoing in my head. I almost dropped the chalice, but I forced myself to hold it. "Elias, stop this!" I shouted. He looked at me, and for just a moment, I saw fear in his eyes. Then the ancient hunger swallowed it, and his mouth curled into a grin. "You can't protect me forever. They need me, and deep down, you know they'll take me, with or without your rules." The doors burst open. The fog poured inside, thick and alive. Figures crawled through, their bodies shifting like smoke, but with limbs that bent and cracked, mouths opening wider than they should. The temperature dropped so fast frost spread across the stone floor in seconds. My breath turned to white vapor. The creatures didn't rush me. They didn't even look at me. All of their eyes, dozens, red and glowing, focused on Elias. He opened his arms like he was welcoming them. "See, they can't wake without me. But now I am ready." For the first time, I broke the rules. I grabbed him by both shoulders and shook him hard. "Elias, listen to me. You're not just theirs. You're still human." The moment I said it, the chanting stopped. The glow from the chalice faded. The creatures froze at the doorway, hissing unsure. Elias stared at me like he'd never heard that word before, human. His lips trembled. Then everything happened at once. The creatures shrieked, furious, and rushed forward. Elias collapsed, screaming, clutching his head as if something inside him was tearing in two. The chalice cracked and split apart in my hands. I dragged him back from the fog, throwing us both against the stone floor. I shouted the only thing I could. "Fight them. You're not their key. You're more than that." The creatures slammed into the doorway, but they couldn't cross fully. It was like some invisible barrier still held. They clawed and screamed, reaching for Elias, but couldn't touch him. He looked at me one last time, tears running down his pale face. His voice was small, almost a whisper. "If I stop, they'll never forgive me." "Then let them starve," I said. And with that, Elias fainted in my arms. The chanting ended. The symbols vanished. The fog pulled back slowly, and the creatures with it, leaving nothing but silence and frost. The rules had been broken, but somehow, for that night at least, we survived.